Hello and welcome to our channel, where we share the most gripping and thrilling stories. My husband, Paul, was supposed to leave for a 10-day business trip to Tokyo. I personally saw him off all the way to the security checkpoint at the airport. But the very next morning, I received a call from the district attorney's investigative unit. They informed me that my husband had been found with a woman. Both were lifeless and completely naked in a bathtub at an estate in the Hamptons. When I arrived at the scene and clearly saw the woman's face next to him, my eyes widened. I couldn't believe what was happening. It was 6:00 a.m., and the early morning twilight was still clinging to a thin veil of clouds. The only sound was the scraping of a street sweeper's broom against the asphalt, creating a dreary, monotonous noise. I had parked my car in front of the departure terminal at JFK Airport. The chill from the giant air conditioners inside made me shiver. Or maybe that coldness stemmed from a vague premonition creeping into my mind. When I stepped out of the car, Paul's tall, imposing figure in his tailored gray suit filled me with a sense of security, as it always did. After an exhausting day at work, spent among cold corpses, I hurried to open the trunk to help him get his large suitcase. I accidentally brushed against his wrist and froze. The second button on the cuff of Paul's suit jacket was loose. It looked like it was about to fall off its seemingly perfect spot. Due to my profession as a medical examiner, I was used to noticing every little detail. I frowned and said, "Wait, honey, this button is loose. Let me grab a needle and thread from my purse and fix it right now. It wouldn't look good if it falls off during a meeting with important clients." Paul looked at my fingers, smiled faintly, and gently pushed my hand away. His voice was affectionate, but there was a strange rush to it. "No need, sweetheart, or I'll be late for check-in. When I land, I'll ask the hotel staff to take care of it. You worry too much." He leaned in and gave me a light, quick kiss on the forehead. The familiar scent of his cedar wood cologne, mixed with the faint smell of a cigarette, filled my nostrils. It was the scent of my husband, the scent of safety that had been with me for 7 years. But why did it suddenly carry a sense of detachment and evasion? I watched him roll his suitcase toward the VIP security line. His slight limp made my heart ache. It was the lingering consequence of an old motorcycle accident when he had shielded my body with his own. Before he disappeared behind the sliding glass doors, he suddenly stopped, turned toward me, and waved vigorously. His smile was bright under the yellowish airport lights, but his eyes were full of a deep sorrow, as if he were trying to memorize my face for the last time. I drove back into the city as the streets were just beginning to fill with the morning commute. The sound of car horns pulled me out of my deep thoughts about my husband's strange look. My phone vibrated in my purse, a new message. I glanced at the screen and saw a bank notification. A massive sum of money had just been transferred into our joint account. The number of zeros made me pull over to the shoulder of the highway to look closer. In the transfer details, there were only 3 words: Emergency Reserve Fund. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine, and I broke out in a cold sweat, even though the AC was running. In the world of high-stakes corporate business, there were terrifying rumors about unwritten rules. One of them was the transfer of assets or the creation of an untouchable reserve for a wife and children right before a highly risky deal or an inevitable clash with the law. Why emergency reserve fund and not for expenses or investment like he usually wrote? Those words stared back at me from the screen like a final will and testament. Like preparation for a worst-case scenario, he couldn't tell me to my face. I tried to calm down. Maybe he was just being overly cautious before a long trip abroad. But a wife's intuition, combined with the instincts of someone who constantly deals with death, gave me no peace. That night, after a day of battling cases and constant anxiety, I had just fallen asleep when the phone rang. A call in the middle of the night was never a good sign for a medical examiner like me. It usually heralded an unnatural death or a bloody crime. I picked up the phone. The screen flashed the name of my boss, Captain Davis, from the NYPD Detective Bureau. "Hello, Captain. I'm here." My voice was hoarse from sleep and the fear rising in my throat. Silence hung on the other end of the line for a few seconds. I could only hear his heavy sigh and the distant wail of a siren. My boss's voice wasn't as firm as usual. It was hesitant. "Sarah, you need to stay calm. A patrol unit just called in. They found your husband." I sat up abruptly. My heart was pounding out of my chest. "What do you mean found? He's on a flight to Japan." "What are you talking about?" "He was found at an estate out in the Hamptons." "They." The captain's voice grew heavier. Every word struck my ears like a hammer. "Brace yourself. The scene is complicated. He's dead. I dropped the phone, and it fell onto the bed. It felt like a black hole had swallowed all the sound in the room. It couldn't be. Just this morning, he was smiling at me. The button on his cuff was loose. I sat paralyzed in the dark. A freezing sensation washed over my entire body. But I knew I couldn't break down right now. I am his wife, but I am also a medical examiner. I had to go there to see him at least one last time. I tore down the Long Island Expressway like a madwoman. My foot pressed the gas pedal to the floor, making the engine roar and tear through the quiet night on the way to the Hamptons. The mansion stood isolated in the middle of an overgrown, sprawling yard. The blue and red lights of police cruisers danced across the trees, casting bizarre shadows against the ivy-covered brick walls. When I stepped out of the car, my legs were trembling so badly I almost collapsed. But professional discipline forced me to stand tall. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the night wind, separating the world of the living from the realm of death inside. Familiar colleagues averted their eyes or lowered their heads. No one dared to look me straight in the face. A young officer named Simmons, who always used to joke around with me, blocked my path. "Dr. Sarah, maybe you shouldn't go in. Let us finish up, and you can identify him later. It's a rough scene." I pushed his arm aside. My voice was so cold I didn't even recognize it myself. "Step aside. I'm a medical examiner, and I am the victim's family. I have the right to know." I ducked under the tape. The first smell that hit my nose was the unfamiliar scent of death, masking the sharp aroma of expensive bourbon, mixed with cloying perfume and the burnt chemical odor of some kind of narcotic. The massive living room was a wreck, as if a wild party had raged through it. Bottles were scattered across the hardwood floor, clothes were tossed over red velvet sofas, but none of that caught my attention. I walked straight toward the master bathroom, where the flashes of the crime scene investigators' cameras were going off nonstop. Inside a massive white jacuzzi tub sat my husband, Paul. His head was tilted back against the edge, his eyes closed as if he were simply sleeping. He was completely naked. His skin had a strange pinkish hue, a classic sign of carbon monoxide or cyanide poisoning. But the thing that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces wasn't his death, but the woman lying next to him. Her long hair was wet, covering half her face. The woman's bare arm was draped around my husband's neck. Their bodies were intertwined in an obscene posture that would make anyone blush. I froze as the lead crime scene investigator gently brushed the hair away from the woman's face to take a photograph. I knew that face. It was Lily, my distant cousin whom I had always loved and trusted. Lily was only 22, a senior in college. She often came to our apartment in the city for dinner, and always respectfully called Paul, Mr. Paul. A wave of nausea surged up my throat. I had to cover my mouth to stop myself from throwing up right in front of my colleagues. It looked like an obvious case of accidental overdose or an orgy gone tragically wrong. A shameful end for a highly successful businessman. I could hear the whispers behind my back gossip about infidelity, about the poor, naive wife. But when the initial shock subsided, my professional instincts took over, forceful and ruthless. I snapped on a pair of latex gloves, took a deep breath to suppress my emotions, and approached my husband's body. I didn't look at his face or his naked body, the supposed evidence of his betrayal. I focused on the biological markers. I slowly lifted his shoulder and examined his back and buttocks. Under the bright glare of the tactical flashlight, I saw dark red livor mortis lividity already fixed on his back. According to the laws of gravity, if a person dies sitting up in a bathtub, blood pools in the lowest parts of the body, the buttocks, thighs, and lower legs. But on my husband's body, the pooling was spread evenly across his entire back and the backs of his arms. This proved he had died lying flat on his back for at least 4 hours before someone moved him and propped him up in this position. I turned to my boss. My eyes were dry, devoid of tears. "This is staged. He didn't die in this tub. He died lying flat on a hard surface. And then someone transported him here and arranged him in this pose." Suddenly, the bathroom fell dead silent. Even the clicking of the cameras stopped. My statement was like a bucket of ice water poured over their initial assumptions. The dead do not lie. Livor mortis was the most honest witness, exposing the killer's clumsy theatrical production. My husband didn't die in a tragic accident. He was murdered, and his honor was defiled even after his final breath. A screech of brakes echoed from the gates of the estate. Then came the rapid clicking of high heels striking the tile floor, hitting like a hammer against my chest. Before I could turn around, a shadow burst into the room, bringing with it a rush of cold air and the sharp scent of sandalwood perfume. Smack! A vicious slap landed on my left cheek, making my vision go dark. I instantly tasted blood in my mouth. I stepped back, holding my burning cheek, and looked at the woman who hit me. Eleanor, my mother-in-law. Her elegant black silk dress was impeccable, but her face was twisted in pure rage. Behind her stood Richard, my brother-in-law, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses with an impenetrable, deep expression. "You bitch! Look what you've done!" Eleanor screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "I said from the very beginning you were bad luck. You killed my son, and now look. He died naked with some tramp in a bathtub. Aren't you ashamed to face this family?" I swallowed the salty taste of blood, trying to keep my voice steady. "Eleanor, I know you're hurting, but something is wrong here. The lividity on Paul's body doesn't match the position he was found in. I suspect this scene was staged." "Shut up," she screamed, cutting me off. There wasn't an ounce of sympathy in her eyes, only disgust and calculation. "What are you going to do? Cut him open? Let the whole world laugh at my son's mutilated corpse? Do you want the company's stock to crash tomorrow?" At that moment, Richard slowly stepped forward. He placed a hand on his mother's shoulder to calm her down. Then he turned to me. His eyes behind the lenses gleamed with coldness. From his alligator skin briefcase, he pulled out a thick stack of photographs and tossed them onto the glass vanity in front of my boss and the investigative team. The photos scattered, revealing images of Paul and Lily walking into a hotel, having dinner together, and blurry shots taken through a car window. "Sarah, I know you're in shock," Richard said in a calm, measured tone, but every word was sharp as a knife. "But the truth is obvious. Paul and Lily had been having an affair for almost a year. We all knew, but we kept it from you to keep the peace in the family. Today, he canceled his flight to meet her here. Unfortunately, they overdosed. This is a private family matter. We don't want to blow it out of proportion." I stared blankly at the photos. The angles, the lighting, everything was perfectly framed to convince anyone they were having an affair. But I knew Paul, and I knew Lily even better. She had a boyfriend back in her hometown, and she looked at Paul like a father figure. This was an obvious fabrication. "That's impossible." I cried out, stepping forward and grabbing Captain Davis by the arm. "Captain, look closely!" The lividity is on his back. He died lying down. These photos are fake. This is a setup. An autopsy must be performed. It's mandatory. Captain Davis looked at me with deep sympathy, then at Richard. Richard remained silent. He simply pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. An authoritative voice echoed through the massive bathroom, making all the NYPD officers stand up straight. It was the voice of a very high-ranking city official, a man my husband's family often boasted about hosting at their galas. Regarding the incident at the estate, the family wishes the body to remain untouched due to religious beliefs. Handle this quickly. Release the body to the family for a funeral. Do not allow any leaks to the press. We cannot afford a public scandal. When the call ended, Captain Davis sighed and turned to me with a helpless look. "I'm sorry, Sarah. We have to release the body. The family has already signed the medical examiner waiver." I stood frozen in place, watching as the private mortuary staff hired by Richard lifted my husband's body. They wrapped him in a cold black body bag and quickly zipped it up. The sound of the zipper tore through my heart. I realized that in this battle, I was entirely alone. They didn't care how Paul died. All they cared about was their reputation. The numbers on the stock market. In their eyes, Paul's life was nothing more than a PR crisis that needed to be managed swiftly. I looked at Richard as he gave orders to the staff. His Patek Philippe watch caught the light. He turned to me. A slight smirk touched his lips, and his eyes seemed to say, "You lost." The private funeral home was located deep in a heavily wooded area in upstate New York. The facility had been rented out entirely by my husband's family for a private, expedited ceremony. No music, no long line of mourners offering condolences, just a deafening silence enveloping an expensive mahogany casket. Eleanor sat in the front row, holding a rosary with her eyes closed. I didn't know if she was praying for her son's soul or calculating what to tell the shareholders tomorrow morning. I stood in the corner, observing every movement. Richard was outside, smoking, talking to his corporate lawyers on the phone about inheritance and the transfer of power. The mortuary staff, having prepared Paul, had also stepped out for a break. This was my only chance. If I let the lid of this casket close, the truth of his death would be buried forever. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, and slowly approached the casket. He lay there. His face was heavily covered in mortuary makeup to hide the unnatural pinkish flush of his skin. His eyes were closed, as if he were just taking a nap. I looked down at him. A tear rolled down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. Now was not the time for weakness. From the wide sleeve of my black dress, I pulled out a small surgical scalpel, a vital tool from my portable kit. With my left hand, I carefully lifted his head and gently slid the blade into the thick hair at the nape of his neck. I sliced off a small lock of hair, roots intact. I quickly slipped it into a tiny plastic evidence bag hidden in my palm. Hair retains the history of chemical and substance exposure. It would tell me exactly what poison was used. Next, the nails. I took my husband's cold, stiff hand. My heart was breaking. "Forgive me," I whispered, and using a pair of small clippers, I snipped a piece of the nail from his index finger. A quiet click echoed in the silence. I glanced at the door, but Richard still had his back turned, talking on his cell phone. With trembling hands, I retrieved the nail clipping and carefully wrapped it up. But my medical examiner's intuition told me something was still missing. The livor mortis, the pinkish skin. I needed to find the injection site. I pulled out a small medical penlight and examined his body from his wrists down to his toes. No needle marks. The killer was too professional, possessing extensive medical knowledge. The light swept over his neck, and I froze. I slowly pulled back his left ear. On the skin behind the ear, right on the mastoid process, where the skin is thin and has very few nerve endings, was a tiny red dot. At first glance, it could be mistaken for a mosquito bite. But to me, it was the doorway to death. Around the dot was a microscopic bruise, a sign of a hemorrhage that occurred while the heart was still pumping. I quickly snapped a macro photo of the needle mark with my phone. At that exact moment, I heard footsteps from the doorway. "What are you doing?" Richard's cold voice cut through the room behind me. I flinched and quickly shoved my phone and the evidence bags down into my bra. I spun around, feigning deep, tearful grief, my hand still clutching my husband's cold hand. I just wanted to fix his tie one last time," I said, my voice shaking. "It was crooked, and he always liked everything to be perfect." Richard stared at me intently. His eyes seemed to be trying to read my soul. He stepped closer, looked at Paul's neck, then back at me. Suspicion was written all over his face, but perhaps my pathetic, grieving appearance convinced him. He scoffed and waved his hand. "If you're done, get out. It's time to start the ceremony. Don't ruin this solemn moment for the family." I bowed my head and walked out, but my arm was pressed tightly against my chest. There, right next to my beating heart, was the only evidence that could restore my husband's honor. The heavy steel door of the crematorium opened, exhaling a blast of scorching air. I stood behind the glass, watching the casket slowly roll inside. In that moment, it felt like my own soul was being shoved into the raging flames. Eleanor turned away, dabbing the corners of her eyes. Richard stood with his arms crossed. His gaze was locked on the furnace door. He looked more like a man waiting for evidence to burn than a brother saying goodbye. The furnace roared to life, and the flames swallowed the casket. I bit my lip until it bled to keep from screaming. I knew those flames were burning not just my husband's body, but all the physical evidence. There would be no opportunity to re-examine the lividity or the red skin. Everything was turning to ash. But they were wrong. They thought the fire would destroy everything. They didn't know that I, a medical examiner, had managed to preserve silent, irrefutable witnesses. The lock of hair and the nail clipping lay warm against my chest, giving me an invisible strength. "Sarah," Richard said, stepping up next to me. He was so close I could smell the cold stench of cigarette smoke on his suit. "He's at peace now. It's time for you to accept it too. Digging into this any further is pointless. You can't bring the dead back. It will only cause pain for the living and ruin his legacy. Do you understand me? His words sounded like advice, but the underlying threat was clear. He was warning me. I knew that from this moment on, my every move would be watched. I turned to him, desperately controlling my breathing to appear emotionless and submissive. I understand, Richard. I just can't accept it yet. His passing was too sudden. Richard looked me up and down, his eyes flicked toward my chest, sending a chill down my spine. I took a half step back. He smirked and patted my shoulder. Good that you understand. The family won't abandon you. Now that Paul is gone, Mother and I will structure his share of the assets so that you have a very comfortable life. You just need to be obedient. The word obedient made me shudder. He was treating me like a pet. He didn't know that this pet held the key to unlocking the hell he was trying so hard to conceal. As my car pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw black smoke rising from the crematorium chimney. I pressed my hand to my chest and whispered a promise to the deceased. Rest in peace. I will take care of everything. I will make sure the person who did this pays for it all. A sudden downpour struck the city in the middle of the night. I parked in a dark alleyway in an industrial part of Brooklyn. That was where Professor Adams, my former forensic medicine instructor, kept his private lab. I couldn't take these samples to the official city crime lab. Richard's eyes and ears were everywhere. Professor Adams greeted me with a look of deep concern. He didn't ask questions. He just silently took the small plastic baggies from my hand. He knew the rules of our profession. When a medical examiner shows up in the middle of the night, it means justice is being obstructed. I need liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, LCMS, I said, my voice trembling. I suspect poisoning by a muscle relaxant, a non-depolarizing neuromuscular blocking agent. Professor Adams nodded. He put on his glasses and got to work. The hum of the centrifuge, the clinking of glassware, it all blended into the sinister soundtrack of my anticipation. 2 hours later, the machine began to print. Professor Adams took the sheet, reviewed it, and the color drained from his face. Sarah, look. I took the paper. The numbers and graphs were undeniable. The levels of succinylcholine in Paul's blood residue, hair, and nails were 100 times the normal medical dosage. To a regular person, succinylcholine is just a clinical drug. But in our field, it is the devil's poison. It's used in anesthesia for intubation, causing rapid muscle relaxation. But if injected in a massive dose into a conscious person, it is the most brutal murder weapon imaginable. The victim is paralyzed in under a minute. The muscles of the arms, legs, face, everything freezes. They can't move, can't cry for help. But the most horrifying part is that it doesn't affect the brain. The victim remains entirely conscious. They hear, see, and feel everything. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I imagined Paul lying there. He feels a prick behind his ear. He feels his body turning to stone. He watches the killer, likely his own brother, staging the crime scene, stripping his clothes off, laying the corpse of his young cousin next to him. He wants to scream, but his throat is locked shut. His lungs cannot expand to take a breath. He dies of asphyxiation, but not instantly. He dies slowly, in absolute, suffocating terror, as if buried alive inside his own body. He was a witness to this entire humiliating spectacle before darkness finally consumed him. Whoever did this has deep medical knowledge and is incredibly ruthless, Professor Adams said. This drug metabolizes out of the bloodstream very quickly. If you had taken these samples 24 hours later, or after the cremation, no one would have ever found it. I gripped the results tightly. This wasn't an accident, nor a crime of passion. This was a premeditated assassination, cold and cruel. I wiped my tears. My grief hardened into a blazing fire of vengeance. I would find the person who held that needle, the person who watched my husband slowly suffocate in total despair. The rain stopped, leaving a gray sky hanging over New York. I sat in a small coffee shop across from Kevin, an old college friend who now worked as a security technician at JFK Airport. Watch this fast, and then I'm deleting it, Kevin whispered, sliding his laptop toward me. I'm risking my job for you. Orders came down from the top to block all footage related to Paul's itinerary. I nodded and, with a shaking hand, plugged in a flash drive. Video files popped up. I opened the footage from 6:00 to 7:00, 00 a.m. that morning. I saw myself dropping Paul off. His tall frame stood out in the crowd. He headed straight for the priority business class desk. At first glance, everything looked normal, but something was off. I played the moment Paul went through the TSA scanner over and over. He took off his suit jacket, his belt, his watch. Stop. I hit pause and zoomed in. The man on the screen was taking a watch off his right wrist. My heart hammered against my ribs. Paul was left-handed. In 7 years of marriage, I had never once seen him wear a watch on his right hand. His habit was strictly his left wrist. I remembered that morning, when I reached out to fix his button, his watch had been on his left wrist. Just 5 minutes later, it had miraculously moved to his right. I kept watching. The man walked through the metal detector, put his clothes back on, strapped the watch onto his right wrist, and walked away. If you just glanced at his height, haircut, and suit, he was a dead ringer for my husband. But the detail with the watch was the tiny crack that shattered the perfect illusion. Kevin, can you pull a different angle? Something where we can see his face clearer? Kevin typed rapidly. Here, camera 42. A new video loaded, showing the path to the departure gate. The man's head was bowed. He was staring down at a phone, and he had put on a hat that obscured his face. But his gait confirmed my worst suspicions. The man who casually boarded the flight to Tokyo to establish a bulletproof alibi was not my husband. I took my flash drive and began a process I never thought I would apply to my own husband. I ran the video through a gait analysis program. The human body retains a memory of every trauma. In college, Paul had been in a bad motorcycle crash while shielding me. His left knee was permanently damaged. Despite surgeries, his body had developed a natural micro-adjustment to relieve pressure on the bad leg. When he walked briskly, his left foot struck the ground just a fraction of a second faster than his right. The analysis results populated the screen. The stride pattern of the man in the video was almost perfectly symmetrical. No sign of a limp. I dug up an old home video of Paul throwing a football in Central Park and fed it into the software for comparison. The results yielded two entirely different graphs. Paul's graph had a distinct deviation. His left foot's ground contact time was shorter by 0.3 seconds. Those 0.3 seconds, invisible to the naked eye, did not lie. I rested my head on the table. Tears spilled over. The man at the airport was a professional body double. So where was my husband? He couldn't just vanish. If he walked into the VIP lounge and an imposter walked out, then the swap happened inside the business class lounge. It was a private area, restricted access, few people, and no cameras inside the lounge itself. Pure terror washed over me. Paul walked into that lounge having no idea a trap was waiting for him. His enemies didn't wait for him to land in Japan. They struck right where he felt the safest. I returned to the video feeds. This time, I focused on the service exit of the VIP lounge. 7:15 a.m. The service door swung open. Two men in janitorial uniforms were pushing a massive plastic rolling bin, the kind used for dirty linens. The cart looked incredibly heavy. I zoomed in. Both janitors were wearing medical masks and low-pulled baseball caps. The one in the back had a slightly bulkier build. For a split second, as he raised his hand to wipe sweat from his brow, his uniform sleeve slid down. Something glinted on his left wrist. A watch with a metallic gold band. Even pixelated, the shape of the bezel was unmistakable. It was the distinctive porthole shape of a Patek Philippe Nautilus, a luxury piece a standard airport cleaner could never afford. But I knew that watch. I had seen it countless times at family dinners, gleaming on the wrist of my polite, polished brother-in-law, Richard. The horrifying truth crashed down on me like a ton of bricks. The man pushing the laundry cart containing my husband's body was none other than his own brother. Richard had done the dirty work himself. He dressed as a janitor, slipped into the lounge, murdered his own brother, and dumped him in a bin to be rolled out like trash. I felt like my chest was going to explode with rage. He was blood of his blood, yet he was capable of such profound cruelty. I took a screenshot of the frame showing the watch. That expensive Patek Philippe, Richard's ultimate status symbol, had just become the invisible handcuffs tightening around his neck. Having uncovered the mechanics of the airport murder, I shifted my investigation to the second victim, Lily. To my husband's family and the public, Lily was a shameless homewrecker, but I didn't buy it. I used my medical access credentials to pull up her hospital records. Over the last 2 years, Lily had been to the ER 12 times. The official reasons: household accidents, falling downstairs, a minor car crash. But when I opened the detailed files and looked at the x-rays, a sickening reality emerged. Fractured ribs, a dislocated shoulder, a concussion, a hairline fracture in her leg. These were the textbook markers of repetitive, severe domestic abuse. Old fractures barely had time to heal before new ones appeared. Lily wasn't a pampered mistress. She was a prisoner, a punching bag for someone, and I had a very good idea who. Richard was notorious for his explosive, violent temper behind closed doors. Lily had fallen into his trap, ended up under his control, and was being tortured. Her death alongside Paul in that bathtub wasn't the tragic end of a sordid affair. It was the result of my husband's desperate attempt to save his unfortunate young cousin from the clutches of a monster. Paul had found out. He tried to intervene, and his basic human decency got them both killed. I drove to a dive bar in the Lower East Side, looking for Ashley, Lily's college roommate. I found Ashley huddled in a corner booth, looking terrified. "Don't believe a word they're saying on the news," Ashley said, crying into her drink. Lily wasn't his mistress. She was just in terrible trouble. Ashley explained that because of her mother's severe illness, Lily had taken out a loan from a predatory payday lending company. A $5,000 loan had snowballed into $50,000 in just 3 months. The debt collectors started threatening her and forced her to work for them to pay it off. The true owner of that Shadow LLC was a holding company controlled by Richard. He used the debt to make Lily his personal slave, forcing her to entertain clients, and eventually using her to frame Paul. "Mr. Paul found out about everything," Ashley whispered. "He paid off Lily's debt. He wanted to save her. He told Lily to gather all the evidence she could. On the day it happened, he said they were meeting at the Hamptons' house to grab the final proof, and then he was going to get her out of the country." Ashley's story was the final puzzle piece. They weren't lovers. They were two people fighting to escape the grip of pure evil. "Sarah." Ashley reached out and grabbed my hand. "Lily left something." She said, "If anything happens to me, make sure she gets this." From inside her boot, Ashley pulled out a tiny USB flash drive wrapped in plastic. She said this has copies of Richard's orders and secret audio recordings she made. "Oh, and Mr. Paul passed along a message for you. He couldn't text it because he was terrified your phone was bugged. He said, 'Find our silent friend. You're the best when it comes to bones. Silent friend. Nose bones.'" The words echoed in my mind. I knew exactly what he meant. Even at the threshold of death, Paul was thinking of me. My cell phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. "Sarah, come to the estate immediately. We need to discuss important matters regarding Paul's estate." They were making their move. Now that Paul was buried and the physical evidence was presumably destroyed, they wanted to tie up the final loose end, the widow. I squeezed the flash drive in my palm. Fine. If they wanted to play a game, I would show them that this family's daughter-in-law was not an easy target. I walked into the Hamptons mansion. Eleanor was sitting in the main armchair, flanked by a corporate lawyer. On the mahogany table in front of me lay a check for millions of dollars and a one-way first-class ticket to Europe. "This is your inheritance," Eleanor stated flatly. $5 million, plus the upstate cabin Paul bought. "In exchange, you sign this." The lawyer slid an NDA and a settlement agreement across the table. It stated that I waived all rights to challenge my share of the company's stock, and most importantly, I swore absolute silence regarding Paul's death. Pretending to read the document, I discreetly clicked the recording function on my pen. "Eleanor, you want me to leave the country?" I asked softly. "But Paul died an unjust death." "Unjust, my foot," she snapped. "He died because of his own disgusting debauchery. Do you want the whole world to know your husband was an addict? Do you want our stock to tank?" She leaned closer to me. "Sarah, you are a smart woman. You can't bring the dead back. The living are what matter. Take the money and start a new life overseas. Don't be a fool. This family's legacy is more important than one person's life. The family is more important than life," she had just confessed. To her, the life of her own flesh and blood son meant less than their public relations image. I signed the agreement. She thought I was blinded by the money. She didn't know that I accepted it not to buy my silence, But to secure one more recorded proof of this family's absolute ruthless depravity, I went straight back to our old apartment in Brooklyn, the place we lived when we were first married. In the corner of the study stood the silent friend Paul had mentioned, a life-sized anatomical model of a human skeleton. It was a gag gift he bought me for our 3rd anniversary. "Knows bones," I whispered. As a medical examiner, I knew every single one. I remembered a time he randomly asked me about the numbering of the spine. I reached out and simultaneously pressed the 3rd cervical vertebra and the 5th thoracic vertebra. C3 and T5. March 5th. The date of our shared birthdays. A quiet click echoed from the skull. The calvarium, the top of the skull, popped slightly ajar. Taped to the inside of the skull cap was a red micro SD card and a folded piece of paper. I opened the letter. It was Paul's handwriting. "My dearest wife, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. Don't cry. I discovered that my brother Richard is using the company's shipping logistics to smuggle illegal electronics and narcotics. I cannot ignore it. All the proof is on this SD card. Use it to protect yourself and do the right thing. I'm so sorry to leave this burden on your shoulders. I love you forever." I broke down, sobbing as I hugged the letter to my chest. I wiped my eyes and slid the SD card into my laptop. Thousands of files populated the screen. Cargo ship manifests, drug delivery schedules, ledgers of bribed port officials, and audio files of Richard's phone calls. This was a nuclear bomb that would obliterate my in-laws' dirty empire. I gripped the SD card tight. Paul gave his life for this truth. I would not let it be buried. The war was just beginning. I clicked open the files. Behind the company's Project Blue Ocean front wasn't textiles or agricultural imports. It was illegal electronics, toxic waste dumping, and precursor chemicals for a highly addictive synthetic methamphetamine they called Blue Ice. They disguised the chemicals as industrial cleaning solvents. Billions of dollars in dirty money were being laundered through shell companies in offshore tax havens. Crash. A massive bang echoed from my front door. Heavy boots and the scrape of metal they were breaking the deadbolt. They got here faster than I expected. I scrambled, shoving the SD card and the letter deep into my bra. I frantically looked around for a weapon. Nothing but heavy medical textbooks and a plastic skeleton. Bam! The door was kicked open. 3 massive men in black tactical gear and masks stormed in. The leader had a jagged scar across his cheek. "Hand over the drive," he growled, stepping toward me. He was slapping a baseball bat against his palm. "Don't take another step," I screamed, backing up. "Everything in this room is broadcasting live. There are hidden cameras." I pointed wildly at the blinking red LED on the smoke detector. They hesitated for a split second, and that was my window. "Don't listen to her. Grab her," the leader yelled. I bolted for the balcony doors. I was on the 2nd floor. Below was a thick hedge of lilac bushes. Not high enough to kill me, but definitely high enough to break something. There was no other way out. I squeezed my eyes shut and vaulted over the railing. I crashed through the branches. Sharp twigs tore at my skin and clothes. I hit the dirt and rolled to distribute the impact, but a sharp, blinding pain shot through my ankle. I scrambled to my feet, blood trickling down my arm, ignoring the agony. "She went over the balcony, get her!" A voice roared from above. I hobbled to my car, hit the unlock fob, and threw myself inside. As I slammed the car into gear, the scarred man swung the bat, shattering my side mirror. I floored the gas and sped into the night. Now I was a fugitive, actively hunted. But I was also a warrior holding the weapon that could annihilate my enemy. I woke up the next morning in an old, abandoned medical supply warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I was safe here, for now. For 2 days, I hid in the damp building, surviving on instant noodles and bottled water. I meticulously studied every single file on the SD card. I learned that Richard always hosted high-profile charity galas whenever a major shipment arrived at the port to create an ironclad alibi and distract the press. And tomorrow night, a massive black-tie business gala was scheduled at a 5-star Manhattan hotel, the exact same night his largest ever shipment of Blue Ice was due to dock. I bought a burner phone and texted Richard. "Dear brother-in-law, I'll be at the gala tomorrow. I have a gift to exchange for your $5 million. Make sure you greet me." I snapped the SIM card in half and looked at my bruised face in a broken piece of mirror. Tomorrow, the weak, grieving widow named Sarah dies. The goddess of vengeance will rise from hell to collect her due. I walked into the grand ballroom of the hotel wearing a stunning, high-slit black velvet gown. My entrance caused a ripple of silence to spread across the room. Whispers broke out. I walked straight past the confused elite and headed directly for Richard's VIP table. The fake smile froze on his face. "Brother-in-law? Surprise. Good to see you," I said aloud. I missed the family so much I had to come back. I offered a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The waiters brought out the main course. Lobster thermidor. "Richard," I said softly, picking up my steak knife. "Do you know how to kill a lobster so the meat doesn't get tough? You have to drive the knife straight down into its nerve center. One quick, precise stab. It paralyzes them instantly. They can't fight back, but their heart keeps beating for a few more minutes. They die feeling every single cut you make. It's a very clean death. Almost like falling asleep. All the color drained from Richard's face. He knew exactly what I was talking about. "Eat up. It's delicious," I said. "Don't let it get cold. It gets tough. Like a blood debt. Leave it out too long, and it starts to stink. And no amount of money can cover it up." I reached into my clutch, pulled out the black flash drive Ashley had given me, and placed it on the glass Lazy Susan in the center of the table. I slowly spun it toward Richard. As he reached out to snatch it, I clamped my hand down on the glass, stopping it. "Not so fast," I whispered, leaning in. "That's just a copy. The original is loaded onto an automated dead man's switch server. If I don't go home tonight, or if I happen to have a tragic accident tomorrow, at exactly 8:00 a.m., the unencrypted data goes straight to the district attorney, the FBI, and the front page of 10 major newspapers." Richard froze. "What do you want?" "Money? I don't want your filthy money," I sneered. "I want the real passenger manifest for the flight to Tokyo. And I want to know where my husband's body double is hiding." "You have until tonight to think about it." I turned and walked out, leaving him paralyzed in his custom tuxedo. He finally realized the sheep had transformed into the hunter. At midnight, my burner buzzed. Tomorrow, 10:00 p.m. My penthouse on Billionaire's Row. Come alone. Bring the master drive. It was an obvious trap, but I had to walk into it. That penthouse was the most probable primary crime scene. I geared up. My weapons: a spray bottle of luminol, a high-powered UV flashlight, and military-grade pepper spray. 10:00 p.m. I stepped into the private elevator that opened directly into Richard's penthouse. I was greeted by a sprawling, obscenely luxurious living room overlooking the Manhattan skyline. A massive Persian rug covered the center of the hardwood floor. "Let's have a drink first," Richard said, turning his back to walk to the wet bar. I instantly pulled out the bottle and heavily misted the center of the rug with luminol. When he turned back around, I hit the smart home switch to cut the lights and clicked on my UV flashlight. A horrifying, glowing nightmare appeared. On the dark fabric of the rug, massive streaks of fluorescent blue light erupted. A giant pool of blood, with drag marks leading straight toward the private elevator. "What the hell is this, Richard?" I screamed. "You said it was an overdose. Whose blood is this?" The truth was literally glowing in the dark. This is where he savagely beat my husband. "You bitch!" Richard roared, lunging across the room at me. I raised my hand and blasted him straight in the eyes with the pepper spray. He shrieked in agony, dropping to his knees. While he was blinded, clawing at his face, I dropped down, ripped a blood-soaked fiber from the rug, and shoved it into an evidence bag. Through his blurred, burning vision, he heard me and blindly lunged, grabbing my ankle. I kicked him square in the jaw, grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the console table, and smashed it across his head. He collapsed, bleeding onto the rug. I sprinted for the elevator, slamming my hand against the lobby button. Right before the stainless steel doors slid shut, I saw him groggily trying to stand, bellowing in rage. I descended, clutching the golden ticket of physical evidence in my hand. I drove straight to the precinct and demanded to see Captain Davis. I bypassed the front desk and walked into his office, slamming the bloodied carpet fiber and the SD card onto his desk. "Captain, I am betting my life on your conscience right now." Davis looked at the evidence, then at me. Sarah. We've been waiting for this for a long time. The feds and NYPD have been monitoring Richard for 2 years, but he's too slick. We never had direct, hard evidence. Is this enough? I asked, breathless. It's enough to arrest him for assault, but not enough to dismantle his empire. We need to catch him red-handed moving the product. Captain Davis's plan was incredibly high risk. We're going to leak a fake rumor about a surprise DEA and customs inspection at the port tomorrow. At the same time, you keep squeezing him, threatening to release the data. Under that combined pressure, he'll panic and try to move his entire stash out of the warehouse tonight. 2:00 a.m. at the Brooklyn Navy Yard terminals. I was sitting in the back of an unmarked police surveillance van. Richard's convoy of black SUVs arrived. He stepped out, looking frantic, his arm in a makeshift sling from my vase, barking orders at his crew to load the crates into unmarked box trucks. The tactical teams held their breath, waiting for the perfect moment. "Now," Davis whispered. I sent one final text. "Hey, Richard. Nice cool breeze off the water tonight. NYPD SWAT will be there in 3 minutes. Care to guess who just pinged them your location?" Through the binoculars, I saw him read the text. He froze, his head snapping around in sheer terror. "We got a rat! Abort! Move! Move! Move!" he screamed, sprinting back toward his SUV. "Take him down!" Davis barked into his radio. Suddenly, the entire shipyard was flooded with blinding spotlights. "NYPD! Nobody move!" Richard's men scattered like roaches but were instantly tackled by heavily armed SWAT operators. In absolute desperation, Richard pulled a Glock from his waistband and grabbed a terrified dock worker, holding the gun to his head. "Get back or I'll blow his brains out!" A tense, deadly standoff began. He needed a distraction. I pushed the doors of the van open and stepped out into the glaring light. "Richard!" I yelled, my voice carrying over the sirens. He stared at me in absolute shock. You have the nerve to show your face here?" "Why wouldn't I?" I shouted back, walking slowly toward the perimeter. "You murdered my husband. You murdered my cousin. You tried to have me killed. But I'm still standing. And I came here specifically to watch you fall. Shut your mouth, I'll kill you!" He screamed, his rage overriding his sense. He shoved the hostage away and swung the gun toward me. Crack! A sniper's rifle echoed from the top of a shipping container. A round ripped through Richard's shoulder. He dropped the gun, screaming. A SWAT team swarmed him instantly, pinning him to the concrete. The once untouchable, aristocratic Richard now lay in the grime of the docks, broken and defeated. But there was no thrill of victory in my heart, only a profound, hollow sadness. The price of this justice was the lives of the people I loved most. Weeks later, in an NYPD interrogation room, Richard's high-priced defense attorney slid a massive binder of forged medical documents across the table. "My client has a long, documented history of severe paranoid schizophrenia," the lawyer stated. It was their trump card to avoid the death penalty or life without parole. "Let me in there," I told the assistant district attorney behind the two-way mirror. "I know how to break this act." I walked into the interrogation room. Richard was rocking back and forth, playing the part of a madman. I spread the crime scene photos out on the metal table. "You're a great actor, Richard," I said softly. "But do you know what it actually feels like when someone injects you with succinylcholine? It paralyzes your lungs. But your mind stays completely sharp. You see the killer, you hear everything. Paul died suffocating while completely conscious." "Shut up!" he screamed, slamming his hands over his ears, breaking character. "You didn't even plan to kill him, did you?" I pressed relentlessly. "You just wanted to terrify him into backing down, but you miscalculated the dosage. Or maybe you just watched him die and didn't care. You're a coward. I didn't murder him," he roared, slamming his fists on the table, the crazy act completely vanishing. "I just needed him to fall in line. He was just too damn weak, and his heart gave out. I didn't want him dead." His confession was captured on high-definition audio and video. He had caught himself in his own trap. The body double had been apprehended trying to cross the Canadian border. He confessed to the airport swap. NYPD scuba divers had dredged the lake behind the Hamptons estate and found the discarded syringe containing traces of Paul's blood and Richard's fingerprints. The final puzzle piece snapped into place. His medical insanity defense was now garbage. On the day of the trial, His defense attorney still desperately clung to the insanity plea. "Your Honor," I said, taking the witness stand as an expert, "I have supplementary evidence. A toxicology panel run on Richard's blood the night of his arrest. The defense claims he has been taking antipsychotic medication for schizophrenia for 3 years. Then why was there absolutely zero trace of those medications in his bloodstream? Instead, his blood showed massive levels of amphetamines, a stimulant he used to stay awake for days to run his illegal smuggling operations. He isn't crazy, Your Honor. He is just obsessed with money, power, and control." My medical testimony annihilated their defense. After a short deliberation, the jury found Richard guilty, and he was sentenced to life in a maximum security federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. Within a month, the family's corporate empire completely collapsed. Eleanor suffered a massive stroke from the stress and fell into a vegetative coma. On Paul's birthday, my phone chimed. It was an automated scheduled email from him. It contained a short video. Paul was looking into the camera, smiling warmly. "Hi, honey. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it back. Please, don't cry. Don't hate the world because of what happened to me. Go to the bookshelf." Inside my copy of 100 Years of Solitude, I hid an offshore bank book. It's clean money that I earned honestly, separated from the family's accounts. Use it to be totally free. Please, be happy for the both of us. I love you. Always. 3 years have passed since that day. I am standing at a podium in a lecture hall at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine. I no longer work in the morgue performing autopsies. I am a full-time professor. Always remember, I tell my first-year medical students, a surgeon's scalpel is meant to save the living. A medical examiner's scalpel is meant to save justice for the dead. Our profession is cold, clinical, and surrounded by darkness, but our hearts must always remain a burning fire in the pursuit of the truth. The lecture hall fills with applause. I smile. I look out the window. The New York sky is brilliant blue and perfectly clear. I feel light. I feel free. The nightmare of the past is over. My pain has metamorphosed into strength. I know that somewhere, he is still smiling, watching over me. Dear listeners, the greatest victory of our heroine was not when the villain was locked away in a cell, but when she learned to release the crushing weight of vengeance and finally find peace. The power of forgiveness and moving forward is the most potent medicine of all. We hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Your comments are our greatest inspiration. Thank you for listening.